They threw me a party when I told them I was dying. Not a goodbye party, not a we love you party, a celebration, champagne, catered appetizers. My 3 children laughing in the kitchen of my own home while I sat in the living room pretending not to notice the inheritance calculators open on their phones. I was 62 years old, stage 4 cancer, the doctors said. 6 months, maybe 8 if I was lucky. Time to get my affairs in order. Time to say goodbye. Time to make sure my children were taken care of after I was gone. So I called a family meeting. I thought they'd cry. I thought they'd hug me. Tell me they couldn't imagine life without me. Promise to make every remaining day count. Instead, my oldest son Marcus asked the question before I'd even finished explaining my diagnosis. So what happens to the estate? I should have seen it coming. Should have recognized the signs years earlier. But you don't want to believe your own children are capable of that kind of coldness. You don't want to admit that the people you raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, might only love you for what you can give them. I'm not gone yet, I said quietly. Of course not, Mom. My daughter Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We're just trying to be practical. You know, make sure everything's handled so you don't have to stress about it. Practical. That's what she called it. Within a week, they'd moved me out of my master bedroom. So you're closer to the bathroom, Mom. And into the guest room. Within 2 weeks, my son David was asking about my financial advisor's contact information. Within 3 weeks, they were measuring the living room for new furniture. Just planning ahead, Marcus said, when I caught him taking photos of my bedroom. No point letting the house sit empty after I died. That's what he meant. After I stopped being a person and became an inheritance. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't dying. Oh, the cancer was real. Stage 4, aggressive, exactly like the doctors said. But what my children didn't know, what I'd deliberately not told them, was that I'd been accepted into an experimental treatment trial, clinical research, cutting-edge medicine, the kind with a 73% remission rate and results that were rewriting medical textbooks. My oncologist had explained it carefully. Mrs. Richardson, this treatment is remarkable, but it's rigorous. 6 months of intensive therapy. You'll need support, family who can help you through the difficult days. I'd looked at my 3 children, calculating inheritance taxes in my kitchen, and made a decision. I didn't tell them about the trial. Instead, I told them I wanted to do early inheritance distribution, give them their money now, while I was still alive to see them enjoy it. Make sure the estate was settled. Avoid probate. All the practical reasons they'd pretend to care about. They loved the idea. Loved it so much that Jessica actually hugged me for the first time in 3 years. We scheduled the reading for a Friday afternoon. My lawyer, Richard Chen, a man I'd known for 30 years who understood exactly what I was doing, prepared 2 envelopes. One for the inheritance distribution, one for everything else. The day of the reading, my children arrived 20 minutes early. All 3 of them dressed like they were attending a business meeting, not saying goodbye to their dying mother. Marcus brought his financial advisor. David brought his wife, who'd never liked me. Jessica brought a designer handbag that cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. Mom, you look terrible, Jessica said, kissing the air beside my cheek. Are you sure you're up for this? I did look terrible, deliberately. I'd skipped my makeup, worn my oldest cardigan, arranged myself in the chair like someone who'd already given up. I'm fine, I said softly. I just want to make sure you're all taken care of. They smiled, not warmth. Anticipation. Richard cleared his throat and pulled out the first envelope. Thick, expensive stationery with my name embossed in gold. The kind of envelope that promises something significant inside. Before we begin, he said, I want to confirm that Mrs. Richardson is of sound mind and acting of her own free will in this distribution. Of course she is, Marcus said impatiently. Can we just get started? Richard's jaw tightened, just slightly, but he nodded. He opened the envelope and began to read. I, Margaret Richardson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby distribute my estate as follows. My children leaned forward. David's wife actually pulled out her phone to take notes. To my son Marcus, who asked about the estate before asking about my prognosis, I leave the sum of $100,000. Marcus exhaled, smiled, looked at his siblings like he'd won something. To my daughter Jessica, who moved me out of my bedroom a week after my diagnosis, I leave the sum of $100,000. Jessica's smile was radiant. She squeezed David's hand. To my son David, who brought his financial advisor to a family dinner about my cancer, I leave the sum of $100,000. $300,000 total, split evenly. More than generous for an early inheritance from a woman who supposedly had 6 months to live. They were already celebrating, whispering about vacation homes and investments, and finally paying off David's business loan, when Richard held up his hand. There's a second envelope. The room went quiet. Marcus frowned. What do you mean, a second envelope? Your mother asked me to hold this until after the first distribution was read. Richard's voice was perfectly neutral, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Should I continue? All 3 of my children looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in months, and I smiled. Not the weak, dying mother smile they'd grown accustomed to. The other kind. Please, I said. Read it. Richard opened the second envelope, and everything my children thought they knew about their inheritance, about me, about their future, about the 6 months they'd spent measuring my bedroom for new furniture, shattered in exactly 47 words. Words that would cost them everything they'd just celebrated. Words that would prove I'd been paying attention to every single moment of the past 6 months. Words that would make them realize their dying mother wasn't dying at all. She was just done being treated like she already was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not to the diagnosis, not to the inheritance party, but to 3 years earlier, when my husband died and I learned exactly what my children thought I was worth. That's when I started planning, and that's when they started losing. 3 years ago, my husband Thomas died on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. He'd been watering the roses in our backyard, his Tuesday morning ritual for 38 years, when his heart simply stopped. No warning, no drawn-out goodbye. Just there one moment, gone the next. The coroner said it was peaceful, instant, the kind of death people say they hope for when they're being honest about mortality. I found him 20 minutes later, still holding the garden hose, water pooling around the rose bushes he'd planted the year we bought the house. I called 911. I called my children, and then I sat on the back porch steps and stared at those roses until the ambulance arrived. Marcus got there first. Not because he lived closest. David's apartment was 6 miles away. Marcus was 12. But because Marcus drove 90 miles an hour through residential streets like he was racing someone. He burst through the back gate, saw the paramedics, saw me sitting on the steps, and his first words were, "Is he really gone?" Not, "Are you okay, Mom?" Not, "What happened?" Just confirmation that his father was dead. "Yes," I said, "he's gone." Marcus nodded once, pulled out his phone and walked back to his car. I heard him on a call before he even reached the driveway. "Yeah, it's confirmed. We need to move on the business stuff before the estate freezes." The business stuff. His father had been dead for 45 minutes. Jessica arrived next with her husband Brian. She cried, loud, dramatic sobs that brought neighbors to their windows. She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. And then, while I was still holding her, she whispered, "Mom, did Dad update his will? Because Brian and I are buying a house, and if the timing works out..." She trailed off when she saw my face. David was the last to arrive. He'd been at work. He was always at work, running a consulting firm that never quite turned a profit, despite his father lending him money every 6 months. He walked into the kitchen where the rest of us had gathered, looked at his siblings and said, "So what's the plan?" Not, "I'm sorry for your loss, Mom." Not, "How are we going to get through this?" Just, "What's the plan?" The plan, apparently, was to treat their father's death like a business transaction. Within 3 days, they'd hired a probate attorney. Within a week, they were asking about life insurance policies and retirement accounts. Within 2 weeks, Marcus had suggested I sell the house. "It's too big for one person, Mom, and the market's really good right now," and move into a condo they'd already toured. without me. While I was planning their father's funeral, I didn't sell the house. I didn't liquidate the retirement accounts. I didn't do any of the things they kept suggesting with increasing urgency and decreasing subtlety. Instead, I watched. I listened. I paid attention to who they'd become when money was involved. Thomas had left everything to me: the house, the investments, the life insurance. A simple will that said, "To my beloved wife Margaret, who gave me 38 years of happiness." The kids would inherit eventually when I died. Standard estate planning. But my children acted like I was a temporary obstacle standing between them and their inheritance, like I was holding their money hostage by having the audacity to still be alive. 6 months after Thomas died, David asked me to co-sign a business loan. $200,000. Just a formality, Mom. The bank needs a guarantor with assets. When I said no, he didn't speak to me for 3 months. A year after Thomas died, Jessica asked me to help with her daughter's college fund. $50,000. You have so much just sitting there, and Sophia's our only grandchild. When I offered $10,000 instead, she said I was being selfish and hung up. 18 months after Thomas died, Marcus suggested I gift them each $100,000 for tax purposes. When I asked him to explain the tax advantages, he got angry and accused me of not trusting him. They called less, visited less, forgot my birthday 2 years running, remembered Father's Day, sent flowers to the cemetery, but couldn't be bothered to call their living mother on Mother's Day. And then I got sick. The diagnosis came on a Thursday: stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the kind with survival rates measured in months, not years. The kind that makes doctors use phrases like make arrangements and quality of life instead of treatment options. I sat in that oncologist's office alone. My children were all busy with work, and listened to Dr. Patel explain that I had 6 to 8 months, maybe less, definitely not more, unless I qualified for the experimental trial. There's a new treatment, she said carefully. Clinical research, very promising results. 73% remission rate for patients who complete the full protocol. What's the protocol? 6 months, intensive, weekly treatments, strict medication schedule, constant monitoring. You'd need support, someone to drive you to appointments, help with side effects, be there for the difficult days. I thought about my 3 children, about Marcus calculating estate taxes, about Jessica measuring my bedroom, about David asking for my financial advisor's number. What if I don't tell them about the trial? I asked. Dr. Patel looked at me for a long moment. She'd been my doctor for 12 years. She'd met my children at hospital fundraisers and charity events. She knew exactly what kind of people they were. Then they'll think you're dying, she said quietly, and they'll act accordingly. That's what I'm counting on, I replied. She enrolled me in the trial that afternoon. Confidential medical records, private treatment scheduled during hours my children would never think to check on me, a treatment plan designed to save my life while my family planned my funeral. But before I told my children about the cancer, I did one more thing. I called Richard Chen, my lawyer, and explained what I wanted to do. 2 envelopes, 2 truths, 1 test that would reveal exactly who my children had become. Margaret, he said carefully, are you sure about this? I thought about Thomas watering his roses, about the 38 years we'd spent building a life, raising children, sacrificing for their education and their futures and their happiness, about how quickly they'd forgotten all of it the moment he was gone. I've never been more sure of anything, I said, and that's when I stopped being their mother and became their test, a test they didn't know they were taking, a test that, in 6 months, they would fail so spectacularly it would cost them everything they thought they'd already won. The first thing my children did when I told them about the cancer was calculate how long they'd have to pretend to care. I announced it at Sunday dinner, a tradition Thomas had started that died with him and that I'd resurrected specifically for this moment. All 3 kids around the table, their spouses, my granddaughter Sophia, who was too busy on her phone to notice anything was wrong. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I said between the main course and dessert. The doctors say 6 to 8 months. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Jessica burst into tears. Marcus went pale. David excused himself to the bathroom, and I heard him on the phone through the door. Yeah, we need to accelerate the timeline. 6 months, maybe less. The timeline. For my death. What they didn't see was the treatment journal hidden in my bedroom, the one where I documented every appointment at the trial facility, every infusion, every scan showing the tumor shrinking by percentages that made Dr. Patel smile and say, remarkable and unprecedented. Week 1 of treatment, Marcus moved me out of my master bedroom. The guest room is closer to the bathroom, Mom. You'll be more comfortable. He didn't mention that he'd already been photographing my bedroom furniture to appraise its value. I let him move me. Then I went to my Tuesday treatment and watched the first round of medication drip into my veins, killing the cancer they thought was killing me. Week 2, Jessica hired a home health aide without asking me. You need help, Mom. We can't be here all the time. The aide was nice enough, a woman named Patricia who worked 3-hour shifts and spent most of them on her phone while I pretended to be weaker than I was. What Jessica didn't know was that Patricia and I had become friends, that I told her the truth about the trial, that she was documenting every visit my children made, or didn't make. Your daughter came by for 11 minutes today, Patricia would write in her log, asked about medication schedule, took photos of prescription bottles, did not ask how you were feeling. Week 4, David brought his wife Karen to discuss care options, which turned out to be code for nursing homes. We found a really nice facility, Karen said, sliding a brochure across my kitchen table. It's only 40 minutes away, full medical staff. You'd be so much more comfortable. I looked at the brochure, looked at David, who couldn't meet my eyes, looked at the nursing home that cost $8,000 a month and had a 2-year average stay. 2 years I didn't have, according to my diagnosis, which meant they'd save money by putting me there to die. I'd like to stay in my home, I said quietly. Mom, be reasonable, David argued. You can't take care of yourself, and we can't be here every day. We have jobs, lives. Lives, like I didn't. I declined the nursing home. Then I went to my Thursday treatment and told Dr. Patel that my cancer markers had dropped another 15%. Week 7, I asked my children to help me sort through Thomas's belongings. His clothes, his books, the workshop in the garage he'd spent every Saturday in, building furniture and fixing things that didn't need fixing. Marcus showed up an hour late with a moving truck. We'll just donate everything, Mom. Easier that way. I wanted to go through it together, I said. Your father's things. I thought you might want something to remember him by. Marcus checked his watch. I've got a meeting at 3. Can we speed this up? Jessica didn't come at all. Sent a text. Too emotional, can't handle it, just get rid of it all. David came, but spent the entire time on his phone with his business partner. When I asked him to help me move a heavy box, he said, "In a minute, Mom." And that minute never came. I ended up sorting through Thomas's entire life alone. Patricia helped me. And I kept one item from his workshop, a small wooden box he'd made for our 25th anniversary. Inside, I placed copies of every text message, every voicemail, every documented moment of my children's behavior over the past 6 months. Evidence, not for a trial, for the second envelope. Week 10, Marcus asked about my will. Not subtly, not gently. Just, Mom, have you updated your will? Because with the medical expenses and everything, we should make sure the estate doesn't get complicated. It's handled, I said. Can I see it? Just to make sure everything's in order? No, I said simply. He didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that. Didn't call, didn't visit, just disappeared until he needed something. Week 13, Jessica planned a memory celebration for me. A party where I could say goodbye to everyone while I still could. She sent invitations, booked a venue, hired a caterer. It'll be beautiful, Mom, she said. Everyone who loves you, all in one place. We can take photos, make memories. What she meant was, everyone who loves you saying goodbye, so when you actually die, we don't have to do a real funeral. I told her I wasn't comfortable with a memory celebration while I was still alive. She cried and said I was being selfish, said she was trying to do something nice, said I never appreciated anything she did. Meanwhile, my cancer was in remission. Complete remission. Dr. Patel showed me the scans. Areas that had been dark with disease were now clear, clean. The trial had worked. "You're going to live, Margaret," she said, smiling. "Barring any complications, you'll be here for years." I cried. Not sad tears, relief, grief, anger, all of it mixed together, because I was going to live. And my children had spent 6 months proving they couldn't wait for me to die. Week 19, David asked to borrow money, $75,000 for his failing business. "It's now or never, Mom. And when you're gone, I'll be getting that anyway, so why not give it to me now when it can actually help?" When I'm gone. Like I was already dead. I said no. He slammed his fist on my kitchen table so hard a mug fell off and shattered. "You're being vindictive," he yelled. "You're dying anyway. Why does it matter?" Patricia in the next room documented everything. Week 22, Marcus brought his financial advisor to a family dinner. They spent 2 hours discussing my assets, my investments, my life insurance policies. They spoke about me in third person, past tense, like I wasn't sitting right there. "When she passes, the house alone should net around $1.2 million, the advisor said, checking his notes. "Split 3 ways, that's $400,000 each, minus estate taxes." Marcus nodded, took notes, asked about accelerating the sale. I excused myself to the bathroom and threw up, not from cancer, from disgust. Week 24, the final week before the scheduled inheritance reading, I did something none of them expected. I invited them all to lunch. Told them I wanted to discuss the early inheritance distribution. That I wanted them to have their money now, while I could see them enjoy it. That I was tired of worrying about estate taxes and probate and all the practical concerns they kept bringing up. They were thrilled. Called it generous and thoughtful, and exactly what Dad would have wanted. Not one of them asked how I was feeling. Not one of them noticed I'd gained weight back, that my color was better, that I was stronger. They only saw the money. And that's exactly what I needed them to see. Because the reading was in 3 days, the first envelope would give them exactly what they wanted, and the second envelope would take it all away, along with every illusion they'd ever had about who their mother really was. Richard Chen held the second envelope like it was evidence in a murder trial, which in a way it was, the murder of whatever relationship I'd once had with my children. Marcus was already on his phone, probably texting his financial advisor the good news. Jessica had tears in her eyes, but they weren't sad tears anymore. David's wife Karen was literally bouncing in her seat. $300,000, $100,000 each, free money from their dying mother. "There's a second envelope," Richard repeated, his voice cutting through their celebration. Marcus looked up from his phone, irritated. "What kind of second envelope?" "The kind your mother asked me to prepare." Richard's expression was perfectly neutral, but I'd known him long enough to see the satisfaction hidden behind his professional mask. "It contains the conditions of the inheritance you just received." The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Conditions?" Jessica's voice went up an octave. "What do you mean, conditions?" Richard opened the envelope with deliberate slowness, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and read 47 words that I'd spent 6 months perfecting. "The inheritance distributed today is conditional upon the following requirement. Each recipient must spend a minimum of 40 hours per month providing direct care to me for the next 6 months, documented and verified by a neutral third party." Silence. Then, "What?" Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "That's insane. You're dying. You won't even be here in 6 months." "Then the condition will be easy to fulfill," I said quietly. "Mom, this isn't funny." Jessica's face had gone from flushed with excitement to pale with panic. "You can't just add conditions after giving us the money." "Actually," Richard interjected, "Mrs. Richardson can. The inheritance was distributed with clearly stated conditional terms. If those terms aren't met, the money reverts to the estate. It's all perfectly legal." David was doing math on his phone, his fingers moving frantically. 40 hours a month. That's 10 hours a week. "Mom, I have a business. I can't just—" "You had time to bring your financial advisor to my family dinner," I interrupted. "You had time to tour nursing homes. You had time to calculate how much my house would sell for before I was even gone. His mouth opened, closed. No words came out. What kind of care? Marcus demanded. What are we supposed to do? Richard consulted the document. Grocery shopping, meal preparation, transportation to medical appointments, household cleaning, companionship, the standard activities of daily living support that a dying parent would require. But we hired Patricia for that, Jessica protested. Yes, I said. You hired someone else to care about me so you wouldn't have to. But if you want to keep that money, you'll need to actually show up, actually be present, actually act like children who love their mother. This is manipulative, Marcus said, his voice rising. You're bribing us to spend time with you. No, I corrected. I'm paying you to do what you should have done for free. I'm giving you money to pretend to be the children you stopped being when your father died. The words landed like grenades. Karen, David's wife, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. So if we don't do this care stuff, we have to give the money back. Every penny, Richard confirmed, plus interest calculated from today's date. But we've already spent some of it, Jessica gasped. I put a deposit on a lake house this morning. I signed papers. Then I suggest you fulfill the conditions, Richard said simply. Marcus was pacing now, his face red. You planned this whole thing, the early inheritance, the reading, all of it. You set us up. No, I said, standing slowly, more steadily than they'd seen me stand in months. You set yourselves up. I just gave you the opportunity to show me who you really are. David's voice was quiet, dangerous. And who are we, Mom, according to you? I pulled out my phone, opened the folder I'd been compiling for 6 months, started reading. Week 2. Marcus visited for 11 minutes, asked about my medication schedule, took photos of my prescription bottles, did not ask how I was feeling. Marcus went still. Week 7. Jessica canceled 3 scheduled visits, sent flowers instead. Card said, thinking of you, but was signed by her assistant's handwriting. Jessica's face crumpled. Week 13. David asked to borrow $75,000. When I said no, he said, and I quote, "You're dying anyway. Why does it matter?" David looked at the floor. Week 19. Marcus brought his financial advisor to family dinner, discussed my assets in third person, past tense, while I was sitting at the table. I looked at each of them, my 3 children, the babies I'd carried, the toddlers I'd raised, the adults who'd forgotten I was still alive. I have 6 months of documentation, I continued. Every visit, every phone call, every text message, every moment you proved that you were more interested in my death than my life. Mom, Jessica started. So yes, I interrupted, there are conditions, because I want to see if any of you can actually be the people I raised you to be, even if I have to pay you to try. The silence was absolute. Marcus was the first to break it. Fine, 40 hours a month. We'll do it. It's only 6 months. Only 6 months. The same 6 months they'd been counting down like a prison sentence. The same 6 months they'd been planning my funeral and measuring my furniture and calculating inheritance taxes. There's one more thing, I said quietly. Richard handed me a folder. I pulled out medical documents, scan results, treatment records, lab reports with numbers that had gone from critical to normal over the past 6 months. I'm not dying, I said. 3 faces, 3 expressions, confusion, disbelief, then, slowly, horribly, understanding. What? Marcus whispered. The cancer is in complete remission, has been for 8 weeks. I've been in an experimental trial. It worked. The doctors say I'll live for years, maybe decades. Jessica made a sound like she'd been punched. So those 40 hours a month? I continued. That's not for 6 months of me dying. That's for 6 months of proving you deserve to be in my life when I'm still living. David stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You lied to us. No, I corrected. I just didn't tell you about the trial. Everything else, the diagnosis, the prognosis, the timeline, That was all true when I told you. You just assumed I'd chosen to die instead of fight. Because you didn't tell us, Marcus shouted. Because you never asked, I shouted back, louder than I'd spoken in months. Not once in 6 months did any of you ask about treatment options, about second opinions, about clinical trials. You just accepted that I was dying and started dividing up my life like I was already gone. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Get out, Marcus said, his voice shaking. All of you. I can't. I need to think. He grabbed his keys and walked toward the door. Jessica followed, sobbing. David stood frozen for a moment longer, looking at me like I was a stranger. You're still my mother, he said finally. How could you do this? I met his eyes. I'm still your mother. How could you? He didn't have an answer. None of them did. Because the truth was simple and devastating. They'd spent 6 months planning my funeral while I was busy saving my own life. And now they had a choice. Spend the next 6 months proving they deserved to be called my children, or lose the money and the mother they'd already lost without even noticing. For 3 days, none of my children called. I spent those days in my house, my master bedroom that I'd moved back into the morning after the reading, waiting to see which of them would choose money over pride, which would choose me over ego, which would choose it all. Patricia came by on Monday, not for work, just to check on me. How are you holding up? She asked, sitting at my kitchen table where my children had sat 3 days earlier, celebrating an inheritance they'd already lost. Honestly, I don't know. I poured us both coffee. Part of me hopes they'll do it. Show up, try. Prove that somewhere under all that greed, they're still the kids I raised. And the other part? The other part knows they won't, and wonders if that might actually be easier. Patricia squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. They needed to see themselves clearly, even if it hurt. Especially because it hurt, I thought. On Thursday morning, 6 days after the reading, Marcus showed up at 7 a.m. I heard his car in the driveway, heard him sit there for 5 minutes before getting out, heard him walk to the front door and stand there for another 3 minutes before finally knocking. I opened the door. He looked terrible. Unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes. Wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of the designer suit he'd worn to the reading. I'm here for the 40 hours, he said. No preamble, no apology, just transaction. Okay, I said, stepping aside to let him in. He stood in the entryway, the house he'd grown up in, looking around like he'd never seen it before. Or maybe seeing it for the first time in years. What do you need me to do? I handed him a list. Grocery shopping, yard work, cleaning out the garage, simple tasks that required time and presence. The things he used to do as a teenager before he learned that time was money, and money was everything. He took the list without reading it. This gets me the money, right? I do the hours, I keep the 100,000? If you complete the full 6 months, yes. He nodded, started to walk toward the door, then stopped. Were you ever actually dying? His voice was quiet, almost childlike. Yes. The cancer was real. I just didn't tell you I was fighting it. Why not? I looked at my oldest son, the one who'd asked about the estate before asking about my prognosis, the one who'd brought a financial advisor to family dinner, the one who was here now not because he loved me, but because he loved money more than he hated being wrong. Because I needed to know, I said simply. Know what? If you'd care more about me dying or me dead. He flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair. Neither is measuring bedroom furniture while your mother is still sleeping in it. He left without another word, but he came back the next day, and the day after that. Jessica took longer. 2 weeks passed before she appeared on my doorstep, her eyes swollen from crying, holding a casserole she'd clearly bought from the grocery store but put in her own dish. I'm sorry, she said before I could say anything. For everything. For not being there. For the lake house deposit. For... Her voice cracked. For planning a memorial celebration while you were still alive. I took the casserole, stepped aside to let her in. I don't expect you to forgive me, she continued, words tumbling out like she'd been rehearsing them. I know I was horrible. I know I failed you. But I want to try. Not for the money. Well, not just for the money. For me. Because I need to know I'm not the person I've been for the past 6 months. I looked at my daughter. My only daughter. The one who'd moved me out of my bedroom? The one who'd hired someone else to care? The one who was here now, crying real tears that had nothing to do with inheritance and everything to do with shame. 40 hours a month, I said. We'll see who you are at the end of 6 months. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Can I start now? We spent that afternoon sorting through old photo albums. Her as a baby, her first day of school, her wedding where I'd helped her into her dress and she'd told me I was the best mother in the world. When did I stop meaning that? She asked, looking at the wedding photo. When your father died and you realized I came with an inheritance, I said honestly. She cried harder, but she kept showing up, week after week, sometimes resentful, sometimes genuine, always there. David never came. 6 weeks after the reading, his lawyer sent a letter formally declining the inheritance and renouncing any claim to future distributions from my estate. My client feels that the conditions placed on the inheritance are manipulative and emotionally abusive, the letter read. He chooses to prioritize his mental health and distance himself from this toxic dynamic. Toxic. The word stung more than I expected. Patricia found me crying in the kitchen that afternoon. He's not coming, I told her. David's not coming. I know, honey. I'm sorry. He'd rather have nothing than admit he was wrong. He'd rather lose me completely than spend 40 hours proving he cares. Maybe that's his choice to make, Patricia said gently. You gave them all a choice. He made his. She was right, but it didn't hurt any less. Marcus completed his 40 hours every month like clockwork. Mechanical, dutiful, never early, never late, never more than required. We barely spoke during those hours. He'd do the tasks, document the time, and leave. But in month 4, something shifted. He was cleaning out the garage, the same garage where his father had spent every Saturday, where Thomas had taught him to use tools and fix things and build with his hands. Marcus found a wooden toy truck Thomas had made when Marcus was 5, held it like it was made of glass, and started crying. I found him sitting on the garage floor, that toy truck in his hands, tears streaming down his face. I forgot, he whispered. I forgot what it felt like to just be here. Without wanting something, without calculating value, without thinking about what comes next. I sat down beside him, didn't say anything, just sat. I'm sorry, Mom, he said finally, for all of it, for who I became, for who I stopped being. I know, I said. We sat there for an hour, not talking, just existing together in the space where his father had existed, where family had meant something more than assets and inheritance. Jessica finished her 6 months. Marcus finished his. David's $100,000 reverted to my estate, and I donated it to the cancer research facility that had saved my life. On the day the conditions were fulfilled, I called Marcus and Jessica to my house one more time. You both completed the terms, I said. The money is yours. No more conditions. Jessica nodded, looking at her hands. Marcus stared at the wall. But I want you to know something, I continued. I'm rewriting my will, the real one, the one that matters when I actually die someday, years from now. They both looked up, nervous. Marcus, you get nothing. Not because you didn't fulfill the conditions, but because you did it without ever meaning it. You showed up for money, not for me, and I don't want my death to be another transaction for you. He closed his eyes, nodded slowly. I understand. Jessica, you get everything, the house, the investments, everything, because somewhere in those 6 months you stopped pretending and started trying, and that's worth more than any amount of money I could leave you. Jessica started crying, again, but different tears this time. And David? Marcus asked quietly. David made his choice. I'm respecting it. He wanted distance. He'll have it. 6 months later, I ran into David at a grocery store. Pure chance. He looked older, thinner, tired. "Mom," he said, stopping his cart. "David." We stood there in the cereal aisle, two people who'd once known everything about each other, now strangers. "I heard about the will," he said finally. "Jessica told me." And I think I made a mistake. Not about the money, about you." I waited. "Can I—" He stopped. Started again. "Can I take you to coffee sometime? No conditions, no inheritance, just coffee?" I looked at my youngest son. The one who'd chosen pride over presence. The one who'd walked away rather than admit he was wrong. The one who was standing here now, in a grocery store, asking for something money couldn't buy. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." Because here's what I learned in those 6 months. Some people change when they're forced to see themselves clearly. Some people change when they lose what they took for granted. And some people never change at all. They just get better at pretending. But the real gift, the one that mattered more than any inheritance, was learning which of my children was which, and knowing that I'd live long enough to see it. Margaret's story isn't just about inheritance or family betrayal. It's about something deeper. The moment when you realize the people who should love you unconditionally are actually just waiting for their turn at the will. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever felt like an ATM instead of a parent, a bank account instead of a family member, or an inheritance instead of a person, you're not alone, and you're not wrong for feeling hurt by it. This channel exists for stories like Margaret's, stories that people whisper about at family gatherings but never say out loud. Stories about what happens when love becomes transactional and family becomes a business arrangement. Every week, we share true accounts of parents who tested their children's loyalty, siblings who revealed their true colors when money entered the equation, and families who discovered that blood isn't always thicker than greed. If you want more stories that expose the uncomfortable truth about inheritance, family dynamics, and what people really value when you're no longer around to see it, subscribe right now. Because the next story might be about the child who fought over the funeral arrangements before their parent was even buried, or the sibling who contested the will before reading what it actually said. Drop a comment and tell me, if you could test your family's true intentions, would you? And what do you think you'd discover? I read every single comment, and your perspective might shape a future story. Before you go, I want you to think about something Margaret told me when we discussed her decision to create that test. "I didn't do it to punish them. I did it to give them a chance to prove me wrong. They just couldn't." That's the tragedy, isn't it? Not that people fail the test, but that they don't even realize they're being tested until it's too late. The people in your life are showing you who they are every single day. The question is, are you paying attention? If Margaret's story taught us anything, it's that the truth about family doesn't come out when you die. It comes out when they think you're dying, and that difference matters more than any inheritance ever could. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story, and trust me, it's one you won't forget.